The 19th century British Romantic painter John Martin was not well loved by the press during his life and career. Though his paintings sold well and were highly regarded by the general public, critics and reviewers absolutely loathed Martin and slammed him for a style they viewed as blunt, bombastic, and unsophisticated. It's true that there was no subtlety to Martin's work. His paintings were epic in scope, meticulous in their detail, and staggeringly melodramatic. But his greatest sin in the eyes of his critics was how derivative he was. Martin had relatively few original compositions, instead favoring scenes taken from the Bible, famous historical poems, and classic works of literature like John Milton's Paradise Lost. Martin was, perhaps, the most famous and best-selling painter of his era. But the critical shunning he received still endures to this day. You'll be hard-pressed to find a Martin painting with pride of place in just about any art museum, British or otherwise. It's a common notion among cultural critics today that the vast numbers of sequels and remakes and reboots being produced is a sign that something rotten has taken hold across all of pop culture.
I clapped when I saw it!
I clapped when I saw Darth Vader!
We are trapped, critics and thinkers say, within endless loops of repetition and reconstitution. We are unable to conceive of new ideas and are left with merely recapitulating that which came before us. This has spurred a renewed interest in the works of the French deconstructionist philosopher Jacques Derrida, who coined the term hauntology. Hauntology is a play on the French pronunciation of ontologie, the branch of philosophy chiefly concerned with the interplay between the subjectivity of human consciousness and the material reality we inhabit. The concept of hauntology contains an undeniable truth, that there is an intimate relationship between the world of the living and the dead, between humanity and the unquiet ghosts we all leave behind to mark our passing. The hauntological past leaves permanent marks upon the present and is always with us. Memory, nostalgia, mourning, and our desires to cling to ritual and superstition. All these things are bound up in the ebb and flow between the present and the past. In 2013, the late writer and cultural critic Mark Fisher published The Metaphysics of Crackle. In it, he explored the genres of electronic and hip-hop music in order to expand upon, and also critique, Derrida's notions of hauntology. Hip-hop, dancehall, and electronic music use technologies like turntables and mixers to breathe new vitality into older musical sounds and tones. Vast amounts of pre-recorded material can be liberated from the proverbial display cases of the museum and brought back to life in stunning acts of resuscitation and recombination.
Just say to me what you do.
Putting it in simpler terms, bad artists borrow, great artists steal.
Back from the slums of Peter Wu.
Hey yo, jumping out of Ben's wagons. My family live in the hill. They call us Ben Latins, laughing.
In painting the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo directly copied his contemporary Masaccio's Expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Brancacci Chapel in Florence. The subjects of Edouard Manet's famous Luncheon on the Grass are lifted directly from engravings of Raphael's greatest figure paintings. Back then, they didn't call this plagiarism or appropriation. It was treated as homage. This is a story about how history is written via the power of memory and culture, and most of all, about the rise of one of the most powerful and appealing anime series in recent memory, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Come on, you knew I'd stick the landing.
Oh my God!
I'm a Joe star.
saying, oh my God, I'm trying to tell you I'm a JoStar.
Wait, is this a JoJo's reference? One of the silver lining upsides to being stuck inside for most of 2020 is that I finally had time to get fully caught up on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This show is incredible. JoJo's is like watching the best parts of a well-choreographed pro wrestling match fall into place. It's extremely zany, crass, and over-the-top, and the moment-to-moment action of the average episode goes through some labyrinthine twists before the credits roll.
地獄でやってろ.
But despite being so loud and in your face, JoJo's is also great about endearing you to its characters. The audience gets to know the cast so well, their stories and struggles become very relatable despite the fantastical premise. It's a silly show that is also more than capable of delivering poignant moments that hit you right in the feels. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure tells a tale that is epic in scope, starting at the close of the 19th century and spanning all the way through to the modern era. The show follows the members of the Joestar family down through the generations, who are endowed with superhuman martial arts abilities as part of their struggle against an unending procession of deadly supernatural foes and bisexual vampire lords. And each chapter of the saga stars a new protagonist from a new generation in a new locale. Victorian England, Depression-era America, 1980s Japan, and beyond. Each part of JoJo's is also radically different from the one that preceded it, and yet each chapter also contains just enough connective tissue in the form of characters and themes and story that it still feels fully integrated within the greater narrative whole. For a story that was first conceived and published in the 1980s, JoJo's is all the more remarkable for how it feels even fresher and more relevant than so many of its contemporaries. With each new chapter, JoJo's reinvents itself. The show is constantly introducing new constitutive elements and remixing old ones, taking what fans thought they knew and turning them on their heads in delightful and occasionally shocking ways. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure originally debuted in the weekly Japanese magazine Shonen Jump in 1987. Since then, creator and illustrator Hirohiko Araki has published hundreds of chapters of the comic, which have been collected across more than 120 and counting manga compilation volumes, selling more than 100 million copies. There have been multiple attempts to create anime and live-action adaptations of JoJo's, including a solid 6-episode OVA by the late, great Satoshi Kon. But none have come anywhere close to the quality and popularity of the most recent version, by David Production, that debuted in 2012.
Yes. Oh my god.
JoJo's itself, and the most recent anime incarnation in particular, was hugely inspired by Buronson and Tetsuo Hara's classic shonen series, Fist of the North Star.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
I clapped when I saw it!
And while JoJo's is a self-conscious parody of these vintage stories, Araki reveals himself to be a much more engaging and thoughtful storyteller than many of his contemporaries.
美しい男たち。美しい男たち。まあ女性もいたりしますけど。いますけども。美しい男たちを描くっていうのがなんかメインですかね。その滅びの美学とか。なんかそこにしか生きられない人たち。
That is to say, Araki is unafraid to be absolutely sadistic in how he treats his protagonists and his audience's expectations. Any character could die at any moment, and they often do. And then come back!
Mohammed Abdul! Yes, I am!
And rather than give us weak-sauce villains hiding behind a facade of moral ambiguity, the antagonists of JoJo's are all singularly evil and villainous bastards, the kind you absolutely love to hate. The fact that almost every character is named after an iconic musical act is the icing on the cake. It all makes for a truly eclectic concoction, a melting pot of the most seemingly incongruous ingredients. Avant-garde fashion with a BDSM twist, classic horror films and tarot cards, Western rock and alternative music, and shonen protagonists who put the full range of masculine and queer expression on blast. But if we really want to get to the heart of what makes this series so special, then it's time to talk about, my God, those poses. The JoJo manga and anime aren't just famous for their bonkers storytelling and spectacle-driven, envelope-pushing action sequences. The show is also beloved for what Japanese fans have, for decades, called JoJo dachi, the JoJo pose. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Japanese fans made it their unofficial national pastime to recreate the signature poses of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure protagonists online and in public. In-person meetups dubbed JoJo's Posing School saw series superfans form flash mobs and put on public performances of the most iconic poses in the JoJo's canon. And on media-sharing websites like Nico Nico and the early incarnation of YouTube, JoJo's devotees could share their passion with the world and go viral, before our notions of viral memes were even a thing. In 2007, as part of an interview for the series' 20th anniversary with the magazine Quick Japan, creator Hirohiko Araki said that it was the existence of the JoJo pose fandom that made him realize for the first time that his creation had become a true pop culture phenomenon. Amazing. This is modern art. The JoJo pose is a way to achieve a perfect balance between reality and fantasy. The rise of JoJo pose was more than just a happy accident or quirk of fate. The out-of-this-world contortions and countenances of the JoJo's cast were in fact derived from Araki's love of classic paintings, Renaissance sculptures, and modern high fashion. Many of the most iconic manga panels and anime scenes from JoJo's are a direct transposition of the legendary art and illustrations of fashion designers like Gianni Versace and Christian Dior. But these references to high fashion and classic art are so much more than just empty invocations, more than just postmodern pastiche. To take the most recent art remix from the anime, a stylized depiction of Michelangelo's slave and prisoner statues is used to powerful effect in the Fighting Gold opener for JoJo's Golden Wind arc. The main emotional through-line of the Golden Wind season is the struggle against an overwhelming fate. Can you write a new destiny for yourself when everything already seems set in stone? All of Bucciarati's crew, and the capo himself, come from past experiences that make them feel weighed down and chained by fate. All of them were born into terrible situations that could have easily defined their lives. But through sheer struggle and force of will, they were able to find and forge new destinies.
石を破壊すればよ、形を変えることができればよ。ミサ逃がすかバカミサ
The main villain of this season, Diavolo, stands in opposition to these values. He seeks to bend the powers of time itself in order to control the destiny of every living thing on Earth, with him reigning at the top of the pile. The invocation of Michelangelo's slave and prisoner statues is a direct expression of this theme. These statues were created to purposefully appear as though they're only half finished, trapped within the stone they were carved from. The concept of these figures as slaves and prisoners is literalized, encased as they are within their tombs of marble. Upon completing the statues, Michelangelo himself remarked that he did not carve them so much as work to liberate their imprisoned forms. In this way, Bucciarotti's crew are symbolically linked to Michelangelo's sculptures. Like the statues, they too appear half-formed, attempting to burst out of their shapeless origins and assert their identities in a cruel and unforgiving existence. When you feel trapped underneath the weight of the world, sometimes all you can do is pose.
Break down, break down. Listen, break down, break down. Listen, break down, break down. Break down, break down.
Late 2019 through early 2020 was no doubt the period when JoJo's Bizarre Adventure burst into the Western mainstream in a big way. All this, in turn, has helped give rise to a tidal wave of fan content and remixes on social platforms like YouTube and TikTok. And there was one trend, one meme in particular, that exemplifies better than anything else the instant appeal of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The JoJo Pose Challenge. In the singular moment of the freeze frame, reality and fantasy become one. Thanks to the power of social media, the JoJo Dachi phenomenon that originated in Japan more than 20 years ago has finally made its way to the West. Individual JoJo poses and compilation videos have been viewed hundreds of millions of times across these platforms in what amounts to a true blue, globe-spanning viral sensation. It's a meme that contains, within itself, a crystallization of everything that makes JoJo's Bizarre Adventure so amazing and appealing.
こうか。こういうこと。痛い。そう。ちょっと待って。こういうこと。あ、ちょっと待って。ナランチャすごい。
JoJo's is a series that, despite being created well before the modern web was even a thing, seems purpose-built for eye-catching internet virality. In nearly every single episode or manga chapter, there's at least one instance of the cast's oddball and visually distinct characters twisting themselves into contortions that instantly grab hold of the viewer's attention. These positively yogic poses are a visual motif for the nature of the show itself. You might think yourself a shonen battle anime expert who has already seen it all. But JoJo's is here to remind you that the greatest adventures in life always have a few tricks and twists in store, just waiting to blow your mind. And as with any good viral sensation, it was only a matter of time before some enterprising memester came along to capture this lightning in a bottle.
JoJo, pose, pose, pose. JoJo, pose, pose, pose.
These bedroom bars are a little bit goofy, but hey, so is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In short order, Apollo Fresh's JoJo Pose became the official soundtrack to the newest version of the JoJo Dachi meme. You'll be hard-pressed to find a JoJo Pose compilation now that doesn't use Apollo Fresh as the soundtrack. But Apollo didn't actually come up with a concept for this viral single on his own. The hook and chorus of JoJo Pose are an interpolation, not just of Yugo Kanno's Vento Doro theme from the show, but also of Memphis trap rapper Yo Gotti's Pose.
Hold up. Pose.
One long, unbroken chain of causation, stretching from Renaissance art and high fashion to the brightest young things in the hip-hop scene today. And this new realization of the JoJo Pose meme is just the latest incarnation of a remix art that first arose from the file-sharing scenes of the late 1990s and early 2000s. The anime music video, or AMV for short. On Kazaa, LimeWire, and Napster, and via the early iterations of BitTorrent, dedicated fans shared their favorite scenes from their favorite anime and video games, mashed up with some of the most popular music of the era. Before the age of Discord and social media, superfans could form communities around their shared love of mashup projects like these. I know because I was one of them. AMVs were my first introduction to rare retro anime, fan-translated Japanese video games, and the worlds of hip-hop and electronic music. The first time in my life that I truly vibed with Jay-Z was watching an AMV I downloaded from LimeWire that stitched together the best moments of Dragon Ball Z's Frieza saga with Linkin Park and Jay-Z's official mashup of Numb Encore.
One last time, nigga, make some noise. Get him, Jay. Who you know fresher than Hov?
There were so dang many AMV mashups of DBZ and Linkin Park that certain clever corners of the anime fandom took to calling this trend Linkin Ball Z. In Japan, AMVs were already a relatively common thing. There was a great degree of overlap between anime and the pop music of the 80s and 90s, so it wasn't at all uncommon to have openings, endings, and promotional videos where an idol croons over scenes from a particular series. And hey, if you're interested in learning more about this topic, after this video, you should check out this whole essay I did on classic Japanese pop music. Not long after AMVs first rose to prominence among anime fans in the West, we got to experience the first official anime music video to hit our shores. Daft Punk's Interstella 5555, supervised by legendary anime designer and illustrator Leiji Matsumoto. A lot of impressionable otaku, myself included, watched this for the first time on Adult Swim in the late summer of 2001. Needless to say, our minds were blown, and the course of the rest of our lives became set in stone. And finally, it all came full circle, nearly 20 years after the fact. In the summer of 2020, Cartoon Network aired another AMV, which doubled as an official music video release. Open Mike Eagles' I'm a Joestar.
You're looking at me like open mic, how can it be? I take it real slow, cause you ain't understanding me. I'm a Joestar. I hear you saying, oh my God, I'm trying to tell you I'm a Joestar.
Long live the remix. Even setting aside the world of fan creations, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is only too happy to play around with mashups and remixes on its own turf. Thus, why so many of its characters are named after famous rock stars and musicians. But this dynamic is also apparent in the show's outros, which combine the end credits with famous rock and pop standards, like Roundabout by Yes, I Want You by Savage Garden, and the unbearably horny Freakin' You by Jodeci.
Every time I close my eyes, wake up feeling so horny.
In other words, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure will be the first to tell you that AMVs are officially a thing. JoJo's is a show that is so beloved in part because of its willingness to endlessly experiment with its own building blocks and reconfigure itself into stunning and intriguing new forms. It's such a beloved show exactly because it is so referential and derivative, not in spite of it. No one can own an idea. And no matter what a particular country's copyright laws say, no one can own art either. Information wants to be free, and that's not just an empty slogan. The world we know continues to crash down around us, seemingly faster and faster as the days and weeks go by. But as we witness scenes of devastation unfold, we must remember and take heart. There is more than just wreck and ruin here. There is also opportunity and hope. Thank you for watching. I meant what I said about releasing more videos, and your support is what makes this series possible, so please consider donating $1 or $2 on Patreon, like these fine people here. I am so tremendously appreciative of everyone who donates, shares, discusses, and supports my work. The audience has spoken, and my new goal is in sight. I'm going to do the definitive deep dives on both Persona and Death Stranding when, or rather if, I reach 100,000 subscribers. See you next time.